Hello everybody and welcome to another Storytime video. It has come to my attention that there are actually a fair few short stories I didn't even know existed. I knew there was one about rocks and the mine, which I was intending to read, but as I look back through, there's actually about 5 stories that I can go through for you guys. So I'm going to be doing those in a couple of videos coming up, and I guess it will tide us over until we get our next proper short story in time with the current Living Story stuff, because we didn't have one to do with the Gw2 release, which I find interesting because they did say that this new superpowered Gw2 has some real meaning in the lore. It's not just like a mechanic revamp. Apparently there's a real reason why Gw2's got a lot stronger, which is a mystery because Gw2 was the champion of a now defeated Elder Dragon. What's going on with that? Interesting. So yeah, I'm going to be going through those stories. I've actually got a lot to talk about in terms of Zhaitan for today, but today's story is not necessarily directly related to Zhaitan at all. It is to do with Ellen Keel and Captain Magnus the Bloody-Handed. It's called A Shipwreck, How Ellen Met Magnus. Before we get into this though, the footage in the background is of story mode of Ara. Now, it's not particularly spoilery, but I am going to be talking about pretty big spoilers, I guess, for the personal story of Gw2, so just a little bit of a warning there. The footage in particular, though, it's of story mode. We deliberately played... This is the first time I played story mode since the launch of the game, basically. Like, I hadn't gone back through it until very recently. And I'd forgotten, you know, I always appreciated how cinematic it was. Yeah, the fight at the end isn't so great, but it's still very cinematic. It's a cool dungeon, but the reason why I went back through it is because I had heard you could break out of the map. And that's what I was trying with my guildies there. So the footage is going to be a little bit weird, but it's quite interesting because by breaking out of the map, which can be achieved by... basically, you complete the whole mission, and then instead of hitting leave instance, you jump off of the airship. Now, this will kill you. You'll go into an insta-kill zone before you hit anything remotely interesting, but you won't respawn on the ship at the end, the Glory of Tyria. You'll actually respawn on the previous airship called the Humble, which has now crashed and is underwater and is upside down, and it's kind of weird, and the crew are just sort of floating there. Now, you are supposed to be boxed in there. There's invisible walls all around you, so you can't swim out, but the invisible walls are really weirdly made. Very, very weirdly made. And if you do swim in the most precise, ridiculous of manners for ages against these invisible walls, eventually you can break out. And this means you're swimming around outside of the bounds of the level in what would be regular Ara, right? But not on the airships above, like right down below. Don't forget that story mode, the story mode version of Ara is much larger than explorable mode. Explorable mode is huge, but if you look at the map on story mode, you see that all of explorable Ara is pretty much just the top left-hand corner of the entire map. All this stuff in story mode where you're flying around on the airships and you're fighting all these giant dragons and giants, and where you see indeed that point of interest known as the Dragon's Lair, that stuff is all like miles away from explorable Ara, so this is all like uncharted territory. It's really, really cool. In particular, if you break out, you can find Zhaitan's body after you have defeated Zhaitan. It's obviously not meant to be there, but you do get to see his body. You can like swim through some fake floor, so you'll see me doing that. And also you can, if you want, try to get to the Elder Dragon's Lair. It is clear to me upon replaying that mission that ArenaNet were definitely going to have like another phase to the Zhaitan fight, where yes, you shoot him out of the cannons, and yeah, it's kind of a cool bit, but it's not meant to be really difficult. And then we were supposed to land, I'm so sure of it, we were supposed to land at this extra point of interest that, as far as I understand, no player out of the 4 million players of Gw2, not a single one of them has unlocked that point of interest. There is an unreachable point of interest in the middle, in the heart of Ara story mode, named the Dragon's Lair. It's right near where you shoot Zhaitan out of the sky, and I'm sure that in its initial inception, ArenaNet were going to have us land on the airship in that area, which reminds me a lot of the Ebony Citadel of Malix, actually, which I think is quite cool. But there was going to be this big arena fight, this actual on-foot fight using all your skills, incredibly difficult, defeating the Elder Dragon for once and for all, but it just got cut out, so we just sort of shoot him down with the airship and then credits roll kind of thing, which really sucks. But yeah, you can swim around and try and get up to the point of interest, but you still can't unlock it even by breaking out of the map, because the point of interest is way up in the sky. It looks like it was going to be some kind of an on-foot battle, but up in the sky nonetheless, and none of the rocks around there have collisions, so you can't quite get to it. Anyway, that's the footage in the background. I wanted to give it its own little section, I guess, in the video, just so that you guys understand what you're even seeing there. And yeah, with that out of the way, let's have a look at this story, which will, again, tie back into everything I'm talking about with Ara, funnily enough. So it is all related, guys. Right, A Shipwreck, How Ellen Met Magnus. Ignore Ara for now. We're talking about Living Story. A little while ago, this was around the time of the election, a bit of backstory for Ellen Keel, who before the election was pretty much in every single Living Story update. You may remember, if you've watched some other videos on my channel, I talked about how she has a history of Captain Magnus. This is that history. It's not the longest of stories, but I would like to share it anyway. So, this was 26th of July 2013 by Angel McCoy. The ship was sinking. Little Ellen Keel huddled in her parents' berth, waiting for them to come back for her. The water was rising, churning and black. A dirty, oily gleam rippled upon the surface. It was cold, freezing cold, where it lapped at her toes. Ellen squeezed herself into the corner as tightly as she could. The cupboard doors tilted open and spilled out their belongings, clothes, toiletries and books. It all splashed down in the water and slowly sank out of sight. "Mama?" Ellen called. "Mama, where are you?" A monstrous groan that rose up from far below, and the ship creaked. "Mama!" The water was unrelenting. In no hurry, it filled the cabin from bottom to top as the walls shifted askew. Body shivering beyond control, Ellen trod water with difficulty. Her tears blended with the salty sea, as lost as she in its vastness. When the water overcame her, Ellen promised the gods that she would be a good girl, forever and ever, if they would only send her parents to get her. "Please," she silently pleaded, "I'll be good." Suddenly, something large and strong wrapped around her ankle and dragged her down. She nearly cried out in fear or in hope, but she was moving so quickly through the water that it was going up her nose. She began to cough and choke, letting the all-consuming sea inside. The next thing she knew, her head emerged into the open air, and she inhaled. Her lungs and belly rejected the water in them with painful determination. A thick band wrapped around her middle kept her head above the surface, and a gruff voice growled in her ear. "That's it. Cough it all up. You're gonna be okay." Ellen clung to the Norn who had her in his arms. Her fingers closed around his hair, and she would not let go, not even after he'd set her on the deck of the rescue ship and wrapped her in a blanket. "It's alright, kid," he said. "What's your name?" "Ellen." "I'm Magnus. Are your parents on that ship?" Ellen nodded. "Mama and Daddy." "We've got some people looking for them. It's going to be okay. You can let go of me now." Magnus gently pried at her small hand with his large one. "No!" Ellen insisted and clung harder. Okay. Magnus wrapped her in his arms. "Today's a good day to be afraid. You have tomorrow and the rest of your life to be brave." That's the whole story. It is quite a short one. I was considering almost pairing these off. I don't know whether you guys would enjoy that. You can let me know in the comments if that's alright. But I do have quite a lot of thoughts on what we're seeing here. First of all, there's some pretty big questions this doesn't answer. And as far as I know, there is no answer to this so far. What was Ellen doing on a ship with her parents? Was she originally from Lion's Arch even? Where in the open waters is this? And why did their ship sink? I'm reading Sea of Sorrows at the moment. There's a lot of stuff to do with ships there. So I'm curious, well, why did the ship sink? Did they just hit some reef? Or was this perhaps something to do with the Elder Dragons? Not just Zhaitan, let's not forget. We've also got the Deep Sea Dragon. They have that wonderful line in there about a monstrous groan from underneath. I think this is just referring to the sound a large ship would make as it's under, a lot of strain and duress. But, it's sort of reminiscent of the idea that there's some monster out there, perhaps, that is responsible for the sinking of this ship. We don't get the answers. Why was Ellen there in the first place? What really is her background before this? And then on top of that, the rescue ship. Why was Magnus on the rescue ship? How did he know to get there in time? Was it just pure luck? And the timescales as well. I guess this would put this story before the events of Edge of Destiny. Okay, now why do I say that? Because Captain Magnus features quite prominently in that book. Magnus himself was already a reasonably well-established character before the game even came out, though he wasn't added to the actual client until like November last year. Magnus is, and has been for a long time, a member of the ship's council in Lion's Arch, so he's already quite a prominent dude there. But also, more notably, he is the head of the Lion Guard. So if you do something wrong in Lion's Arch, if people are talking about the Lion Guard, usually his name is thrown around. It's because he's the guy in charge of basically the Lion's Arch police. And indeed, you see him in that capacity in Edge of Destiny. I won't spoil the details, but basically what he does is he takes prisoners and allows them to fight in the Lion's Arch arena, and that's sort of when we first get to interact with him. But even more importantly than that, in Edge of Destiny, he teams up with Destiny's Edge to take out a dragon champion. Dragon champions are really, really significant, okay? We can't undervalue how strong they are meant to be. Yes, we've spent most of our time in Guild Wars 2 just killing the Shatterer over and over and over again, but to put this in perspective, for Edge of Destiny, no one had ever killed a Dragon's champion. It was Destiny's Edge were the first people to ever really step up and manage to do such a thing. And Captain Magnus was a big part of one of their early Dragon champion kills. It was a champion of Zhaitan named Gw2. And together with Kaith, it was Captain Magnus, this person saving Ellen Keel here, that managed to defeat this Elder Dragon champion. And Moondeath is kind of what brings me around again to the Arar story mode dungeon, because Moondeath, this champion, is himself a very interesting character. Morgus was also once a captain of Lion's Arch, but he was killed and corrupted by Zhaitan and later made into a champion. Okay, this guy is just as powerful and just as significant as Gw2 the Sunless, right? Size doesn't necessarily have anything to do with being an Elder Dragon champion. This was a Norn. Moondeath too, just like Captain Magnus, was a Norn. And this is why there was this kind of interesting story and duality between the two of them. Moondeath was a Zhaitan champion who was the size of a Norn. And he was particularly interesting too, not just for his size, you know, as compared to Gw2 the Sunless, but the fact that he was like a really early example of the Elder Dragons and their minions being really intelligent and strategic to do with their war against, you know, I guess the races of Tyria. Because Morgus, once he was turned by Zhaitan, he like handed over all this information about the Lion Guard and about the defenses of Lion's Arch, their naval routes and their strategies. And it became a really dire situation for the people of Lion's Arch and for Captain Magnus, because now all of a sudden the Orient army had all of this understanding about them and could easily essentially wipe them out. And that's why it was so important that Moondeath was killed. And this is all the backstory of Captain Magnus. So I find it really interesting now to go back to Edge of Destiny, and every time this character comes up, Magnus, thinking about, oh, he's actually had this history with this character, Ellen, and maybe Ellen somewhere, you know, just in the background in this book, and we never really get to meet her or understand her, although she's on the periphery of the story, as it were. And I really like that. Since we were talking about Elder Dragon Champions 2, and I've just played Arar story mode, another note I'll just throw in there that I find quite interesting is, yes, we have Gw2 the Sunless, everyone's familiar with him, but there's actually 4 more champions just like Gw2 that we meet in the personal story, though of course they're much easier to kill and they're much less, you know, ceremonious. The first of them was Blightghast the Plague Bringer, which was the dragon that attacked Claw Island, and then we had 3 in Arar story mode right at the end, and I love all of their names. I think their names are fascinating. I think some of the best things the writers of Guild Wars 2 ever did was naming those areas in all of Or and in Arar, and naming like the really dangerous minions and stuff. So check out these names, okay? These were the 3 dragons to attack the Humble, this airship I was talking about, in Arar story mode, okay? The first one is Fafnerin the Heartslayer, and with him attacks Horagos the Soulbreaker. I've googled both of their names, Fafnerin and Horagos. They like have no relation to any real world mythology or anything, which is a bit of a shame. But we've got the Heartslayer and the Soulbreaker, heart and soul in there. And the other dragon as well, who I find infinitely more interesting, is Ogravros the Moondeath. The Moondeath. What an interesting title for him. The Moondeath. This is obviously anything that refers to Tyria's moon, I am automatically just thrilled and intrigued by. So that was the other Elder Dragon champion. Anyway, we've got these big dragons, and I'm just saying that they are in league. They are akin to Moondeath, another champion slain in the Edge of Destiny by Captain Magnus the Bloody-Handed, who also saved Ellen Keel. I know we're skirting around the story quite a lot, but there you go, guys. I am incredibly curious about the future for Captain Magnus as well. There is a lot of stuff to do with him now, but I can't even find him in game at the moment. I went into Lion's Arch before recording this video and tried to have a look around. I can find Ellen Keel, I can find all the other members of the Captain's Council, but I cannot find Magnus anywhere. I do also find it quite funny to read a story like this and then think back to like all the Ellen Keel conspiracy theories that were going around, and you have this line like where Ellen thinks she's going to die and she pleads to the gods that she will be good forever, and it kind of makes it a bit harder to believe she ever could have been evil, do you know what I mean? But then And I get, again, like, if she did end up evil, it would have just made this story that sting that much more, like how she sort of ended up betraying her gods and going back on the oath she took as she thought she was about to die. I also really like this idea that faith in the human gods is starting to wane, right? You should understand this about modern day Tyria. A lot of humans sort of are like, do they even really exist? Some of them even question they were ever really a real thing. And I love the idea that despite this mentality going through humanity these days, as they're all about to die, they all turn to their gods anyway, and they plead to their gods. And from Ellen Keel's perspective, you know, she's pleading with the gods, please, I'll be good. And in that instance, she is saved by Captain Magnus, and it's like she could definitely attribute that to the will of the gods. Was it the will of the gods? That's up to the audience to interpret, right? Which I really enjoy. So yeah, this was this story, Captain Magnus, guys. A little bit about Zhaitan's numerous dragon champions and a RAR story mode. Thank you very much for watching. I might start pairing the stories up, but if you like that I just sort of skirt around the story and go into other stuff, let me know. Anyway, cheers guys, have a wonderful day, and I will catch you next time.